Hi, I'm Ben Crouch, and this is my Dominican capstone. So, just overall, like as a trip, it was a really neat experience to get to go to the Dominican. I heard about the project through my dad, and he said that this would be a great way that I could knock out my capstone, but also get to do like an experience that would be very beneficial for myself, even outside of the realm of school and looking at future careers. But yeah, so it was a week-long trip in the middle of June 2017, and it was with my dad and 40 other people who all organized from all across the United States to come to the Dominican at the same time under Global Health Outreach, which is an organization that organizes Christian doctors to go to foreign countries and to serve by bringing the gospel via medicine. So what I'm going to do throughout this presentation is talk about my topic, but also just tell some of the stories behind the pictures, because one of the things I learned during my time in the Dominican is that the most important thing is the people. And so if I can share some of the stories of the people, then I can convey more truly what my time was like there. So this is some of our co-teammates that we met there. They were from Texas, a lot of them, because there was a dentist that worked from Texas, and he brought his whole group up to come to the Dominican because dentistry is really needed there. And so we became very close with the dentist, especially Daniel. He liked to work in the dentistry tent, which consisted of reclining lawn chairs on top of wooden pallets where they would extract teeth, fill cavities, and do any dental surgeries that needed to be done. This was a little girl, I forget her name, but I met her and I got the privilege of giving her a Barbie doll and got to communicate with her in what limited Spanish I had at the time, and really got to like love somebody even though I didn't like share a language. I got to love them, which was really awesome and unique, and was kind of a very rare opportunity I got to have while I was there. This is a friend I made while I was in the Dominican. This is Shamel Lopez. She was actually our interpreter, and so she worked very closely with my father and I in communicating with the people of Los Tres Brazos. So for making my decision to go to the Dominican, it was kind of presented to me almost. I had been thinking about my capstone a lot and worried about it, but it came down to my dad just asking me, hey, I heard about this trip and they're going to go to the Dominican Republic in this month, and I was wondering if you and maybe a friend would be interested in going. So I threw it out to my friend Daniel, and he quickly took up on the idea, and we quickly made the plans to actually follow through and do this. And it took a lot of preparation the whole summer before. It was everything from packing walkers to packing wheelchairs and that kind of thing for medical supplies, because you had to know everything that we were going to bring so that we could give it to the people, because they don't have as much of the supplies as we do in such surplus here in the United States. But so yeah, it was really fun to do this process with Daniel and also my dad. So some of my fears like leading up to this was the fact that it was in the Dominican. We would be working in a small neighborhood called Los Tres Brazos, which is the Three Arms, which talks about the river, meets right there in the three places. It's a very poor barrio in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and so there's a lot of poverty there, and I didn't know how I was going to relate with these people. I didn't know with the barrier of language and also the barrier of lives. Like, how am I, as a privileged American, supposed to relate with somebody who I've never met before and doesn't even speak the same language as me? But I quickly learned that these are easily overcome with the gospel. This little girl, she came up to me and we started talking in my very limited Spanish, and so I asked her, I was like, what is your name? And I said this all in Spanish, and she kept saying her name, but I couldn't understand it because she said it too fast, and so I kept saying, repite, repite. And so she thought it was funny that I couldn't understand her, so she looked back at me and she was like, repite, repite. And so we got in this little little fight, and we were just joking with each other. And it was really cool that I could love somebody and just like communicate with them, even though I didn't even share a language with them. This was a walker that was for pediatric use. It was for a child that was between 18 months and 3 years, and so it was a very small walker. And it was really almost heartbreaking to even see that kind of a walker, because you can only imagine the child whose life is going to be permanently affected by something, and to have the privilege to bring them a tool to make their life even a little bit better was very moving. So it's perspective and lessons that I got out of this. For me, the big things were that service is a big part of our role as Christians. Service, and then also just like gratitude, being thankful in all circumstances for everything we have. This picture right here is me talking with some of the interpreters, and just like comparing our lives. I realized that they were similar to me in like my circumstance, that they were very privileged for where they're from, but even like them being privileged was still less than the privilege that I experienced. And so it was really like important for me to realize that like as a West Knoxville Christian, we have a lot, and that we can serve a lot too. We've been gifted, and that can affect so many lives than just ourselves. Also, just that service of being able to step down to a place where you no longer see yourself as different or above anybody, but you can serve them as an equal, and you can love somebody as an equal, even if you've never met them before, is a really important lesson. If I wouldn't actually make any changes, because I believe that God has a plan in all things, and that if I were to change anything, it probably wouldn't be as perfect as it ended up being. He had a plan in every little kink in the road, and everything that happened for a reason. And I got to love a lot of people through that. And I'm thankful that I didn't try to muscle my way over God and make a capstone that maybe would have been more interesting to me, because throughout the week I quickly learned that I get squeamish sometimes, especially in the dentistry tent. I learned that it's not always fun to see teeth pulled and things. But I would explain, this woman, she came and she was actually, I think, 6 months pregnant. And so me and Eric Penniman, my mentor, we actually gave her a checkup and did an ultrasound with a portable ultrasound, and just like had a translator tell her that the baby was healthy and was actually looking really, really healthy. This is also me, one of the days I got to work with my dad and Shamel. This was a family that we got to see, and a lot of this was me looking up to my dad and seeing how a physician can work and how he can use his profession to minister to others and just love people. A big part of our mission was to just love people in the Dominican. My medical aspirations, going into the trip, I thought that I might have a future in medicine. I've always loved math and science, and I've always had a gift for it. And I thought that maybe I'd follow my dad's footsteps and pursue medicine. But after the trip, and after a lot of thinking and talking with my dad, and Mr. Penniman too, I've decided that the medical field isn't something that interests me. Personally, it becomes tedious and discouraging to see how the medical field can affect a physician. Oftentimes, there's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork that gets in the way of actual good care. And we were actually privileged that in the Dominican, there was so little paperwork, because they were just happy to have the care there, that it was very fast. And even in that fast-paced scenario, to me, it still felt slow, because I wanted to be able to do everything as efficiently and productively as possible, and that's just not possible all the time. So these two photos, this was one of the days we got to go to this orphanage where this woman, she was Christian, she opened up an orphanage in her actual house, like in her home, and she basically just took care of these kids and relied on churches like donating to her. And so I actually had to check the height and weight of, I think, like 50 kids. And so one by one, I had to try to use my very limited Spanish, because they were all comparing, so I had to use my numbers. And so I was like, oh, this was like day one of Spanish 1. I have to remember this. And I had to tell them their height and then compare them to the animal that was on the chart. So it was actually fun to use some of that vocab that I thought was completely useless or unnecessary. And then this is a picture of me, Kelsey Brown, and Daniel Galentine. We actually all three got really close over the duration of our trip. Kelsey is doing pre-med and is attending University of Tennessee this year. And so it was really cool to like get to meet other people that were young people aspiring to look into the medical field. So thank you so much for letting me present my capstone.